Inner Voice, a heartfelt chat with Dr. Foojan.
Listen up if you want to promote your personal growth and self-awareness. I found the Foojan app last month and I have been absolutely loving it. I personally have never learned guided meditation, but thanks to this app, I now have learned incredible tools for my own stress relief and emotional self-awareness. Not to mention, there are self-evaluation tools and professional coaching available to utilize however your journey to self-discovery takes you. Join Foojan today and redefine your life one step at a time.
Do you wish to wake up one day and hit the Life Reset button? Life Reset, the awareness integration path to create the life you want by Dr. Foojan Zeine, helps you navigate crucial life areas, heal the past traumas, and cultivate fulfilling relationships and careers. Life Reset is your guide to a profound journey to reshape your life. Grab your copy on Amazon or Audible now and embark on a path to a more joyous and fulfilled life.
Welcome to the Inner Voice, a heartfelt chat podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Foojan Zeine. I'm a psychotherapist and author and the creator of the Awareness Integration Theory. I'm thrilled to have you join me today. I promise you to be an insightful decision. In this episode, I chat with Aly Vredenburgh. She is an emerging leader and an expert in youth advocacy, education, and research. She holds a sociology degree and a master's degree in social innovation from the University of San Diego. Her research in adolescent mental health has been featured in influential scientific journals and conferences with a deep understanding of the factors contributing to the mental health crisis in Gen Zs. And having led Initiative for Policy Changes as past president of nonprofit Vredenburgh, is committed to driving system change and improving a well-being future generations. Today, we will be talking about her book, Out of Focus, which highlights the mental health crisis among Gen Zs, offering a deep dive into systematic issues and advocating for meaningful changes. You can actually find her for further discussing mental health and related topics on her Instagram handle, Aly Vredenburgh, or you can go to outofocusbook.com. We spoke about some of the main issues that Gen Zs are facing, becoming an adult and not having the financial independence or the opportunities to become fully independent, and the issues of drugs and alcohol, the issues of mental health, depression, and anxiety that is consistently with them, issues of finding, who they are, their gender, their sexuality, moving forward with main and most important relationships in their life. So, who they are with social media, with the internet. They've been raised with this, which none of us have done before. So it's a whole new way of looking at the Gen Zs, which I learned a lot from her, and I'm positive that you will too. Be sure to subscribe to my podcast channel and my YouTube channel and connect with me through my website, foojanzeine.com, or any of my social media platforms. Share your thoughts with me. I'd love to hear from you. Go join the Foojan app, or you could get a awareness integration therapy through a self-help app for 31 areas of life. And, we added this feature of Mira, which is an AI chat box where you can ask it questions and it will answer you from the awareness integration therapy. So without further ado, here's Aly Vredenburgh.
Intentional Parenting, a practical guide to awareness integration theory, written by Dr. Jafari, Dr. Foojan Zeine, and Dr. Manoukian, three experts in human development, is your step-by-step guide to raising a healthy child prepared for a culturally integrated world. You're supported in parenting infants to adolescents using the latest evidence-based scientific research on parenting. Order your copy on Amazon now.
Eliminate stress, reduce anxiety, and decrease depression. Dr. Foojan Zeine's Awareness Integration Theory has helped thousands like you get incredible life-changing results. The Foojan app gives you her evidence-based treatment in the palm of your hand. Download today.
Hello, it is so nice to have you, everyone. I'm with Aly Vredenburgh. She is the author of Out of Focus. and we're going to talk about Gen Z, the population, and the issues that are going through, the mental health issues. So, Aly, what got you to want to write about this?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Dr. Foojan. I am honored to be here. I will start by saying I think the biggest reason I wrote about Gen Z is because, well, first off, mental illness is the single greatest cause of worker disability in the world. And there is a huge epidemic of depression and anxiety in Gen Z. And it's so much so that since the 1980s, there's been at least 100% increase in incidence of these conditions. And so for me, growing up with that as a member of Gen Z, I saw firsthand all of my peers struggling with depression, anxiety, ADHD, and I guess since a young age, I was 14, I won the science fair on my research in mental health. And since then, I've just been fascinated about how we address this epidemic and how we actually create real change because even as an adult, I continue to see people struggle and more people struggle. And so I just think it's so important that we as a nation and as a world really start to take this epidemic seriously.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. I not only have a lot of my clients are in this age, but I also teach at the university, which is exactly, the population, the age group that we're talking about. And on the other side, I also work with the parents who, they're raising the Gen Zs, right? So they're the first time that the parents are coming and facing their teenagers and young adults and how they need to parent them in the new environment. The new environment has a lot to do with it, Aly. So let's share about, for example, before the kids were kids and they would take a role modeling from their parents, their teachers, and they would have something to hang on to and move forward. One of the concepts that Gen Zs have had to face is most of the time they were ahead of their parents with technology, with access to information. They had the ability to have all of these information in the on the web with no let's say criteria, no one to really guide them toward. And I think facing and getting faced with a lot of information that could not be appropriate for a certain age. They don't have the wisdom. They don't have the frontal cortex set yet to have a full understanding of all the information that's coming. It can become very overwhelming and can become a burden on many of the teens that I've worked with. What are your thoughts about open internet, open AI, social media, and all of how that could affect the concept of mental health, loneliness, your image of yourself, and all of the above?
Yes, so social media and parenting are two huge topics in this epidemic, absolutely. I would say the important thing to think about in what you're saying in parenting is that we did grow up in such a different landscape, something that none of us were ready for. And parents absolutely had no idea how to react to their kid getting bullied online. And I think a lot of parents had no idea how that affected us, how those words from random strangers on the internet were really hurtful, really impactful for us. And what's interesting is just how differently we were raised than other generations. We were raised by Gen Xers and boomers mostly. And the boomers, the earlier, or I guess the later born boomers, a lot of them kind of they grew up in the aftermath of the Great Depression, right? So they're kind of focused on money and work and that type of way of living. And we grew up in such a different time. So while their generations told rub dirt in it, grow up, you know, big boys don't cry, we grew up with everyone gets a trophy, everyone is special, we're as unique as a snowflake. And so it's very, very different. And at the same time, there were pictures of missing kids on cereal cartons and milk cartons and newspapers, and these kidnappings and safety concerns were being sensationalized all over the news when we were being raised.
And shootings in the schools.
Exactly. And I think a lot of parents, because of that, because of the role of the media and fear, a lot of parents raised us to not have as much free time outside, to be overparented and overprotected. And we've seen in research that that's actually had a pretty big impact on mental health. When someone has an over controlling parent, it can be really detrimental and cause or impact things like depression, anxiety, social isolation. And when we combine that with really caring about a kid's safety physically, but not their safety emotionally, it's the perfect storm for a generation that's been not protected in maybe the right ways.
I think we went from one extreme to another, Ali. So tell me what you think, because like you were talking about the parents from the baby boomers and stuff. It was like, you have emotions? Oh, well, that's a luxury. Doesn't matter. Put it aside. Let's go do things, right? You got to earn money. You got to live. You got to do this and you got to do that. And it's cute that you have emotions, but, not useful. Put it aside. And then now we go to the extreme angle of emotions are everything. It's like if I feel sad, suddenly the world has to stop. If I'm feeling anxious, the world has to stop because I can't do anything because now I'm overwhelmed with my emotion. So I think we went from one extreme to the other also. What are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I absolutely think we did go from one extreme to the other. And I do think social media does play a big role in that. And one of the ways it does it is because back when our parents were struggling with emotions, a lot of times it had to do with physical pain. Like when my parents were bullied, they're shoved in trash cans or fighting in the schoolyard. Bullying looked really different than it does now. Where online, we're having, girls in our class take secret photos of us and posting them online and calling us ugly and things like that. It's painful in such a different way, and it hits in a lot of ways harder because when you have physical pain and some kid is being a jerk, you can process that right there and then, that, oh wow, that person is mean, they did something physically hurtful. But when it's online, it's really different, especially when parents don't understand how to react and what to do about that. And that also, the thing to note is that we're constantly being distracted. Our phones are just such a double-edged sword because when we're distressed, instead of sitting there and feeling the emotion and being in the moment with it, we pull out, YouTube shorts or Instagram reels, and we're going through it, distracting our brains and trying to not think about or process that emotion. And in doing that, I think it's actually making things worse.
Very much. Yes, absolutely. The distractions don't allow you to handle your emotions, but I also think that we're also getting bombarded with media and even social media clips that are trying to ignite our emotions. They're abusing our emotions. Every commercial, every person who wants to become an influencer, everybody who wants to get a million hit on their YouTube, they're going to play on somebody's emotions. So we're getting bombarded with stimulus that is designed to constantly uproar our emotions. And you can see it go from one to the next to the next. So our attention spans have become, 15 seconds, but then this 15 seconds to the next reel, it's one more emotion, another emotion, and then we're exhausted. Our system is overloaded.
Yeah, it's really interesting too, because I think it's so easy to focus on the negative of social media because there is a lot of harm it can do. But we also forget that it does really have to do with the algorithms and the content we're actually consuming. There was this really interesting study, I think that came out recently, that looked at, they had a control group that they gave people media of, really neutral things that they watched for about, I think, 8 minutes. And then they gave this media about like eating disorder behavior, where they had different clips of, girls talking about their diets and things like that. And they found that the group that watched the distorted media immediately felt worse. But with the neutral content, it had no impact. And so a lot of this actually has to do with the type of media and the user themselves, because there is actually so much good that can come from social media. A lot of people who have disability or struggle with various things, social media is actually a phenomenal tool to help connect people who are in those groups. And I think it just really does matter about the type of content.
Absolutely. But bringing it back into the conversation when you talked about overparenting, I think part of what I keep sensing and hearing from parents and then their teen, because as I do family therapy, obviously I see both. And I get this concept that the teen wants to experience, so they'll put in something, they'll hear something from their friends say, oh, look at this, or they'll send them a reel. So, a lot of times their friends are influencing them to go through something, or something's exciting to go. But if the parents are trying to monitor and direct discipline and, watch what's happening, then it becomes the concept of you're overparenting me, you're controlling me, leave me alone. And, there's a lot that happens behind the parents. So we go back into the conversation of there's an argument or a criticism about an overparenting style. And then yet again, the teens are not ready. They get overwhelmed with everything that is happening out there. And if their only influencers are people their own age, and it's not coming from someone who's wiser than them, they're not taking it from anyone who's wiser than them, they're just going in the same age group and taking that in, then it's easy to get influenced and manipulated in all of these. What are your thoughts about this kind of the dichotomy that we need to be guided, but we won't take any guidance from anybody who is older than us?
I think teens are at a point because they're digital natives, right? I think it's important to give them the tools they need through media literacy, like in schools and education, maybe not from the parents themselves, but through literacy programs that will really help them learn. I think that when we put that on parents to kind of not just be parents, but also to, teach kids about media literacy, it becomes a lot on the parents. So I think that if parents or if kids are given the tools to teach the media literacy, I think that's really what is going to help, because I think if parents are constantly monitoring and being the ones, being the social media police, it's exhausting for everyone.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. In your book, Out of Focus, you also talk about obviously drugs and alcohol. When we talk about the mental health, we talk about the extreme amount of emotions that are being instigated for everybody. there's also all of these venues that are there for you to numb it, right? So people use drugs and alcohol for numbing. They use it for excitement, because obviously that age of teenager to young adult is also chemically, they're much more bored than, one of the most important kind of feelings or experiences they have is a constant boredom, which is the chemical changes that are happening at that time in their body too. So you could see people, for more excitement, they'll go toward the drugs, or they go because they have too much emotion and they want to numb it and they have no idea other ways to handle it. They go toward drugs. And this is an era that having access to drugs is as the highest. You could, through internet, through any way that you could get. Some of it legal, obviously none of it legal for that age group, but still some of it legal and some of it not. But definitely a lot of access. And you shared some points in your book. Can you share with us what your thoughts are on this?
You're exactly right. It's a huge problem, and there is way too much access to drugs, and it's extremely frightening. Had become really passionate about the drug epidemic because I lost my friend to fentanyl poisoning. And losing her was one of the hardest things I've ever been through. And she had issues with drug use, and so I personally grew up knowing someone who was under the stronghold of drugs, and I saw firsthand how drugs are, I don't know how to explain it, but they just have this stronghold over certain people. And it didn't matter what treatment she did, what she went through. She tried a lot of different treatments. It still did not keep her away from the drugs. And unfortunately, that's what killed her. I write about how young people are using weed more than ever. And as you know, it's really, really horrible for brain development. It shortens sleep cycles. It has, impacts on depression, anxiety, so many different things that just having weed at a young age, it's associated with developing schizophrenia, so many different things. And yet kids are getting access to marijuana. They can order, various drugs online. There's ads on Instagram that are targeting our kids to say, hey, you should buy this drug. It's incredibly scary. And there's really, so many different things that could be done to address that epidemic, but it's really complicated. And I don't think there are enough DARE programs around the country that are going to actually help educate kids on how horrible this epidemic is and how dangerous it is. And the scary thing is the thing that killed my best friend was a joint. Kids don't realize that, they might be thinking they're having a harmless, puff of weed, and it ends up being the thing that kills them. Because drug makers are now lacing so many different drugs with fentanyl, and so many kids are dying from this epidemic. And actually, since releasing my book, I've had really great feedback, and I've been able to meet a lot of really, amazing people through this. And one person I met was a father who lost his son to fentanyl poisoning. And it's devastating. It is absolutely devastating.
Yes, it is. Part of the programs, I loved what you said also in your book, and you just said that about media, but I also think that it's important to have education also at the, starting with junior high about drugs, because I remember when I worked with teens and I wanted to let them know about marijuana. This was before marijuana became legal. And when you went on internet, there were so many of the research that showed all the harm of marijuana. And then because they wanted to obviously make it legal, when I would say to a teen that we were working together, I would say, let's go together and research, and let's just bring everything it is, and together we'll look at it and see what it is and all of that. We would find a lot of articles that, could convince the person that, yes, this is an issue and this is, they might harm them. At the time that they wanted to legalize it, I used the same intervention with teens and young adults. It's like, let's go together, let's research. So, it's together we're doing this. Nothing. Everything was, oh, it's amazing. It's amazing for every part of your body. It's so good for you. And so it's like, see, and they would come to me and it's like, you wanted me to research? Here's the research for you. See how good it is? So again, the media was changing so much in just wanting to do that. And now, slowly but surely, now that it's legalized, the other side of the harm is coming up. And, but by the time I teach them in university courses, they're already starting to use it since age like 11 and 12. So yes, it seems like literally the education has to start coming from, that age.
Yeah, what you're saying is something I write about in my book. Big weed companies are essentially funding fake research, really weak research, showing how, weed is amazing. It's, it cures all ills, CBD, the best thing ever. There is so much. I mean, they're geniuses with their marketing. They have these weak studies and that sound like they're, to the average person, great research that, prove that weed is this great thing. When people don't necessarily have the research knowledge to know whether a study is good or not. So the average person might think their research is great.
Yes. And unfortunately, if, you've had addiction in your family systems, genetically, and, there's hereditary concepts that comes in, that if one person just uses drugs socially and nothing happens to them, for someone who has the background and the genetic component of addiction or schizophrenia or any of those illnesses, that, like you said, even one joint, even if it's not overdosing on fentanyl, could trigger so many of the other illnesses. And we're trying to bring some assessments that shows up, that can tell parents and teenagers whether they have these genetic components, so that they have another awareness about. For me, a lot of people can use something and nothing happens to them. For me, because of my biological perspective, this might be detrimental to me. So it's like having the ability to have some information before it's too late. So it's so important to have that education, as you said, not necessarily through parents, because it doesn't always, help people. They don't listen to their parents at that age. Everyone out of focus. Why Gen Z's mental health crisis is more complex than you think. And you're so right. It is so much more complex. And I think another level that you also shared in your book, that it's become more and more complex, is the concept of, for the first time, people are learning about their gender, their sexuality, what their preferences are, or maybe it's not a preference, it is just who they are. And I think that also that becomes so much more of, it isn't about the individual necessarily to really see who they are. Now they're also getting sucked into a lot of different messages. One message comes that, no, you're not, you can't be who you are, this is not you, just this is a phase. And then on the opposite, there's also movements about, no, it is, and you have to do this, and you have to go through it. You have to go through a process. And I've worked with a lot of people who, this is a time they're confused. They have no idea. And I've had many of my teenagers who've come to me and said, well, I'm not sure, but maybe I'm gay or maybe I'm lesbian. And then 3 years later, when they've come to my office, they're like, no, there was a phase and I, experimented with things and I wanted to know, but I'm not. Or I have people who come in and they're like, no, I'm not. Their people are telling me and I'm offended. And then 5 years later, they come to my office and is like, yeah, I am, and I need to share with my parents and all of that. So it is a transitional time where teenagers and young adults are really trying to kind of figure out who they are. But that also, it seems like, puts a lot of stress on them through this transitional time. What are your thoughts about that?
I think the important thing to note about any marginalized group is that any disparity in the system is going to affect mental health, whether it's racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism. All these different disparities in our system really do impact mental health. And so, one thing I write in my book is that we need to address disparities in order to actually give people better lives and better mental health. And if we continue to allow things like racism or transphobia to exist in our systems, we're just going to continue to allow these communities to have worse mental health. And it's unacceptable.
Absolutely. I think the transphobia or the conversation about people don't have the rights, you're absolutely right. I think the conversation a little bit more in California, it has been not whether people had the right or not, whether a child had the right to make a decision to change their body and hormones, not just their preferences and their behavior, but their body and their hormones before even age, before reaching an age that their body was fully formed. And it was a constant issue between not only the teenager. This doesn't necessarily happen with young adults, because young adults after age 18, they have the right to do whatever they want and go and do that. So this was more about between 12 and 18, where there's an issue between them and their parents, and then the system, and then the schooling system and everything, which is bringing a lot of conversations up. What are I have experience just because I've worked with all gays, lesbians, going through transitions with people, shifting their body and trans and all of that. So I've had the privilege of working with parents and people who've gone through these transitions and the ups and downs. What are, as you were writing your book and you were going through your research, what are some of the issues that you see happening, and what were some of the paths that you saw that was workable?
Well, I think the key word there is research, right? The research doesn't lie. And so one really cool thing is that researchers found that just using the right pronouns helps reduce suicide significantly. So I think it's just so important to support kids and do what we can to help them feel seen and heard and validated.
Absolutely. The next topic, which I think is also very important, and I see this a lot, is let's say like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, there was a path where you went to school, you got these degrees, and then this was a job you got, this is how much you earned, and you kind of went forward, kind of creating the path in front of you. One thing that has become very differently is the concept of this: if you get this type of education, you're going to have this career. It has shifted. The concepts of, people wanting to have their 15-minute fame and create a startup and become, millionaires, within a year or two is something that people are striving forward. But the other side of it is to learn how to come out of school, going toward wanting to live independently, and then yet the market doesn't allow that to happen. So a lot of Gen Zs have had to go back and live with their family, which doesn't allow them to be completely independent. And they don't experience that concept of independence. It's almost like they're fighting for it, they're yearning for it, but from an economic aspect, they're not able to do that. And then yet also there's so many different opportunities for different ways of creating a career, that a lot of times I've had people who are even going through their bachelor's degree and they're like, I have no idea what I want to do. I'm just getting my bachelor's because I got to get my bachelor's, and they go through $80,000, $100,000 of loan, and they still have no idea what they want to do. And nothing in front of them, kind of. So that has also created a lot of anxiety, depression, low self-esteem. They have no idea. They call themselves losers. And we have, in therapy, obviously, we have to work with that and really find their passion. Tell me.
Yeah, what you're talking about is exactly right. So this graph here that I have in my book is the cost of college since our parents' generation till now. And while the cost of college has gone up significantly, I think about 400 times, uh, the wages have not caught up. And so as a generation, we're struggling so heavily with trying to afford college, loans. I think about 30% of people drop out no matter what in college because they, realize it's not the right path for them. So they're stuck with all those loans or the cost of what they spent. And a lot of times people graduate college and there are no jobs available. They'll be applying for a year, and a lot of times jobs ask for experience. I know very few college graduates that have job experience. We're all focused on getting through school, not on having a job at the same time. And so as soon as we graduate, not only are we at a disadvantage in terms of cost and all the money that we owe potentially in loans, but we're at a disadvantage because we don't have any experience. And so it's like, it's a catch 22. We're told we have to go to college because going to college is the best way to make more money. And the data does show that. I think people make, I think it was like 60% more in their lifetime if they go to college. But the issue is a lot of Gen Zers are graduating right now or have graduated and there's no jobs. And we're all moving back home. We're Starbucks baristas, and it's really it's disillusioning because we feel like, what are we supposed to do? We can't afford a house. The price of housing has gone up an insane amount. A lot of us can't afford rent because that's gone up, an insane amount. And so we're kind of left in this world where we can't afford anything, we can't get jobs, and we're frustrated. And college is just not what it used to be.
Absolutely. What is your suggestion based on looking at all of these type of research data and living it and being surrounded by your friends who are going through a lot of this, the transitional pieces, and some of them are not transitions, they're just, it's a fact of life that now I have to deal with this. What do you want from our audience to know? What is it that you would say, this would really help us as Gen Zs?
Yeah, I came across something called a national service program actually from Pete Buttigieg when he was running for president. And at the time when I heard his idea, I was like, wow, that's a really cool idea. And I looked into it and I looked into the data and just, how that could have an impact. And let's just say college grad or high school graduates were able to do a national service program for 2 years and they'd be earning experience. And in this program, they had a stipend, so they had somewhere to live, they're able to afford their food. And at the end of this service program of 2 years, their college is paid for. So not only do they have college paid for, so they're not worried about loans, but they've earned it through working. So once they graduate college, they have 2 years of job experience under their belt where they can now go and apply to jobs and say, hey, I have this 2 years of experience already, and I have my degree, and I'm not in debt. So what I recommend in my book is that we create a national service program, and it could even be where students partner with various nonprofits, or they do something like AmeriCorps, an expansion of that, but something like that kids can, graduate high school, but have something to do and also contribute to society and work on issues like helping to plant trees or, things that will actually help the environment, or a way that they can learn. And yeah, I just think that would make a huge impact.
Beautiful. if we had 1 minute to kind of share what it is that your message is to everyone, what is it that you want people to know that we haven't shared so far? I know we went through kind of like broad different angles of what a Gen Z group are suffering from or dealing with, the challenges that they're dealing with, and you share each one of them based on research in your book beautifully. And thank you for sharing the idea of what could benefit everybody from a bigger perspective when it comes to young adults who are coming out of high school and moving forward. Is there anything we haven't shared that you really want people to know?
Yeah, I think, I cover so much in my book because there are so many different factors that affect mental health from, nutrition, where 90% of, serotonin is made in the gut. But there's also another range of various things that happen to impact mental health. But I think the biggest thing is economics. And 70% of Americans can barely afford groceries right now. And I think it was like, half of Americans can barely afford a studio apartment. And so people aren't having their basic needs met. And as you know, it's very, very difficult to have good mental health when basic needs aren't being met. And so to me, I think the biggest thing we can do is help meet people's basic needs, whether that's through universal basic income or universal basic healthcare, which are two things I advocate for in my book, where, healthcare, especially mental health care, should be a right, not a privilege. We should all have access to great providers like you. And it's so difficult in our system. And it makes sense that someone's not going to pay $100, $150, $200 for therapy a week when they can't even afford groceries. So I think it's important for people to step back and remember that as a nation and as a world, we're forgetting to meet people's basic needs. So I think just even starting there and looking at that from a prevention standpoint of, well, we need to meet people's basic needs. That's the starting point, and then get them access to care.
Absolutely. And I want to add to what you're saying from my experience, is that people don't have skills in how to handle stress, crisis, their emotions, and decision making. And I do think that those skills have to also be offered. And I hope that these skills are offered through the schooling system. I created awareness integration theory, which not only works in a clinical term, but we're teaching it in Cal State Long Beach. Part of it had to do with because the model really was showing effectiveness in bringing depression down, anxiety down, and raising self-esteem, self-efficacy, and self-agency, which is exactly the group in Gen Z are really needing, to bring down depression, anxiety, and raise self-esteem and self-agency. And when we've done that, even in a self-help model, we saw how much it has high percentages. And so as I'm teaching it right now to the college students that are coming, and you see within, the term that they're 10 weeks, let's say 12 weeks that they're going through this program, they create a different way of thinking, a different way of monitoring, having tools in how to assess. And it's not just give me education, but it's giving you the tools to exactly how to use all of these pieces and bringing that into schools. I think coming from both angles, because you need to learn how to make the right decisions for yourself with all the data that's coming at you, with all the stimulus that is coming at you. You have to have some skills to be able to do that. So I do also think that the educational model, I think that the education was like only self-emotional regulation. It isn't just self-emotional regulation that I'm sharing with you. It's a wisdom of how to actually make decisions for yourself. And part of that is handling your emotion, but it's not all of it. There's so much more to it, which I think that should also be a part of part of the educational system that we have, whether parents learn it and can offer it, whether schools, there's an availability in schools that we could do. And then, there's apps that can teach you to go through that. And that's cheaper than going through a lot of other ones, and it's accessible. So I hope that people have the ability to use that and move forward with it. Where can people find you, Aly?
You can find me at Instagram at Aly Vredenburgh, or you can find me on my website at outofocusbook.com.
Beautiful. Everyone, Aly Vredenburgh, please go get the book, Out of Focus. Let me put it up for you guys so you can see it. Out of Focus, Why Gen Z Mental Health Crisis is more complex than you can think. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with me and everybody who was listening or viewing us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And everyone, create an amazing life for yourself and everyone around you. And until next week, bye-bye.
Are you a psychotherapist looking to enhance your practice? The Awareness Integration Therapy developed by Dr. Foojan Zeine is a comprehensive guide to the principle and techniques of this powerful therapeutic approach. Join the growing community who have elevated their practice and expanded their skills by embracing awareness integration therapy and witnessing its life-changing impact. Order your copy on Amazon now.